Welcome everyone to I guess we used to call these lunch talks, uh, but now that we're all distributed, we haven't been getting together for this sort of more seminar-sized discussion. So it's a great pleasure to be able to do that again. Um, and I'd like to welcome today Edek Sher, who is visiting thanks to a suggestion by one of your classmates, Paul Moiser. So thank you, Paul. Um, Edek Sher is a Los Angeles-based artist who holds an MFA in digital media from RISD. He's taught at RISD and at Brown, studio and seminar courses on systems art, public interventions, research art practices, performance, video games, the internet, and sort of pulls from mythologized products, conspiracy theories, and social media to create video installations, social media interventions, live stream performances, that all explore roles of the individual in the face of antagonistic corporate practices and climate change. So it's very exciting to have this sort of art and installation perspective in an architecture school, and I hope it will be productive for everyone. Edek is sharing a few videos over the course of this talk, and he's linked them into a Google Doc so that in case there are any issues with with viewing the presentation, you can view the videos on your own as well, and that doc is linked in the chat. So with that, I'll send it over to Edek. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Dean Deborah Burke, and thank you, Paul. It's funny, it's like I'm in a room by myself talking. I can't see who's here. So I'm gonna take off one ear, if you don't mind, so I'm not just in a vacuum. Okay, well, thank you for having me. I have just sent the doc a second time in the chat, just in case. I know in past experiences, sometimes when you join later, I know this is a different experience, but so there's one doc you open, and then inside there's 3 links. There's a little instruction in there as well. So, okay, we'll just dive into it. My name is Edek Sher. Thank you for the introduction, AJ. So this talk is called Performing Consumption, and I too hope it's beneficial to you, architecture students. I wanted to be an architect much longer ago, 8-10 years ago, from the beginning of my life. So it's really nice to be speaking here. So it's kind of a nice full circle in a way. So you can email me anytime also after this talk, and you can follow me on Instagram at Edek Sher. So a little bit about me. I graduated from RISD in 2016. I studied English literature in undergrad, and I make work about the individual, corporations, and the environment. And I taught at RISD the last 4 years, and I just moved to California this summer during the pandemic to be closer to family. Yeah, so I've taught classes like public interventions, class called Interventions in Capitalism, Systems and Power, Performance on the Internet, and Performing Post-Internet. So this talk is kind of stemming from that last course I taught a semester ago. Yeah, and kind of, it's funny when I'm teaching classes, I'm not talking about my own work. I have these lectures where I talk about other artists. So I really like the chance with an artist talk to just embed my own self in these lectures I give. So it's pretty cool. So what does performing consumption mean? So my work, I do a lot of different things, but for this talk, right now I'm just most interested in this intersection of performance, like on the internet, and consumption, and maybe accidental or deliberate performances of like consumption or just generally consumerism. So like for example, I take screenshots of just whenever I'm scrolling a feed, Instagram or Facebook or something, even just on YouTube, and I'll see like a bottle of water, I'll screenshot it, and I have like these series of these kind of like works of labor that I do during like my leisure time. This kind of twisted way of being productive when I'm trying to relax or something. And we'll get to those works at the end, and hopefully have time to write so we get to everything. But I've kind of front loaded this talk just in case. So I'm always consuming media online. I'm an avid archiver of this material. So I talk about screenshots, but also just downloading all sorts of things, and it just sits on these hard drives that just kind of get very messy. And then I'll go through phases where I just kind of spend a long time, or like, let's say, like a week straight, just going through the archive and organizing it and kind of starting to collage things together. And so sometimes these collages come out in like physical installations, like with like, for example, 12 screens or just 3 screens, like, or projections on every wall. Or they just exist online in like a single channel, like just as a YouTube video or Instagram post or something. So here's just some examples of what the work often looks like. It's a dark room with a lot of different screens. So I take the media from like often my phone, and I'll just explode it all around to make some immersive environment that's often like 360 degrees, and I'm being surrounded with screens and sound, most of which is just collaged footage, but sometimes I'll insert myself as well. And I also do things where I adjust myself, or just like choreograph installations or experiences with my friends or actors, to come and partake in a piece. And this will be the last piece I talk about, these screenshots here. So I'm going to talk first about my MFA thesis book and thesis show, which is a collection of media I consumed. And then we'll go into that informal screenshots, and then this live streamed performance where you saw those cows in a kitchen. So if you could refer to the Google Doc now, if you please click link 1. I've shared a PDF of this MFA thesis book, and you can just peruse it at your own pace during this talk. Just whatever makes sense to you. I have a couple images of it, but I don't go into as much detail as obviously the book itself has. So this work is an example of my practice, whereas everyone else, it seemed, in my cohort at RISD were making like a thesis book that was very much like grounding their work in art history. They might be referencing a YouTube video or an artist online they're really interested in that like isn't canonized, but like there's a whole handbook on how to make this thesis and have it be official and follow these rules. And I felt kind of very uncomfortable about that. In undergrad, I spent a lot of time like analyzing canonized works, and I felt like we were being trained to kind of, for better or worse, maybe, learn how to present oneself in an art historical context. But I guess I was pretty uncomfortable feeling like I was supposed to refer to like canonized, like maybe problematic kind of artists or works. So I kind of politically just wanted to stay away from it at the time. So this is like a very self-referential thesis where it's kind of a work itself. It's a work of poetry that's collaged from all sorts of different media. So various like YouTubers, either popular or like video that barely anyone had seen, or like children giving a tutorial online or an unboxing or something, and just collaging all these things into the book in a way that kind of reads like a feed. So you can kind of open it anywhere, and it's kind of like you've just opened up your social media, any kind of app, and you just start like streaming in a way. And so I kind of took a low-tech approach to it. A lot of my friends are designers, and they made these beautiful books, and I wanted it to seem kind of not precious, like something casual about it, like informal. So I got the cheapest kind of printing I could get at blurb.com, So each book was like $2 or something. And I think it's officially called a trade book. And each image is just it's like a picture from my phone held up to the screen in kind of different orientations to get this kind of pixelated effect over each page. And so I was really interested in like ubiquitous tools. So just like using a simple text editor and a phone, which in general are pretty accessible as opposed to like a program you have to like subscribe to or pay for to use or steal, I guess. So in this book, like some of the techniques I've been using, I guess I was talking about just downloading and just taking this archive and collection of things and just spewing it onto the page. But I was also interested in just engaging in the cultural history of the internet. So instead of just like regurgitating like thinkers, from 100 years ago or whatever, just kind of, I was like, I didn't really want to talk about Walter Benjamin in my thesis book, so I just kind of went against it completely and didn't, and it was just citing like just normal users on the internet as being what's most important to me. And I guess it's also, my voice is kind of hidden throughout the text. It's unclear, I think it's unclear where my voice starts to enter into that feed and where it is just not a whole page of me being totally invisible, except for the way I orchestrate it, I suppose. So the dedication page, I dedicated to all the fake punks, which in a way is kind of a joke, but it's also pretty serious. I like the tension there. I kind of consider myself a fake punk. Like idea of like punk is very like authentic and real, and just unable to feel like, just growing up in the suburbs and just for something feeling unable to like be punk or something. So this is actually a reference. It's like a self-referential dedication. It's kind of like I'm dedicating this book to myself or my friends or something. So fake punk is kind of came up in one of my friend's songs called Chump. It was in a band. It's from a band that I was in called Food Court at the time. So the lyrics are, I'm a fake punk, I'm a square chump. I'm half asleep staring at a screen, wishing I could reach in and touch you. So it's kind of also talking about this tension between like the physical and the virtual, and just feeling so connected maybe to people online or to certain ideas. But they're also so distant at the same time. And so kind of just amplifying this tension. So here's the image of like the album cover, right? Instead of us reaching into the screen, it's actually a TV, this kind of weird nostalgia, reaching out to this punk or pop punk trope of like a hamburger. There was a version with like a pizza and stuff. So kind of these tongue-in-cheek kind of references all over the place is very much part of my practice. So this page is an example of just all these different places. Some are lyrics, some are like TV news spots that were on YouTube that I downloaded. Something are just like captions from Snapchats, just kind of all flattened onto the page. So the source is totally, in a way, totally irrelevant. They just kind of join in this space and kind of merge, and like a hierarchy kind of disappears, or a hierarchy of media or the source. So that thread or attention of like being a fake punk. So here I have an example of just a thread through the work, I guess of protest, or just the thread through all this work besides like consumption and performance, is just this idea of tension itself. So on the left, there's just an image of protesters protesting Nike, and the bottom left is a cartoon. And this was a 1997 protest, or an era of protest where Nike was getting a lot of flack for their child labor practices outside of the United States. And so I was growing up in like with a family that was like so anti-Nike. They brought me to like protests and things. And so there's one story with my mom. She bought me Nikes, even though she was anti-Nike, I guess. And before I went to school, she stopped me and she used an X-Acto to cut off um, the Nike swoosh off of the white shoes. It's like the black paint, just cut it off. Sorry, I noticed the chat for a second. And then on the right, here's a totally different realm of protest. It's of Nike. Both are like they're meeting at this point of protesting Nike for being upset with some sort of ethical practice. But on the right, here's an image of an American protesting Nike because of Nike's advertisement and relationship with Colin Kaepernick. This was in 2018. So on Kaepernick, like protesting the flag for racial justice and against police brutality, and a lot of Americans saying, I don't want Nike anymore, and like school districts tried to end their like contracts with Nike to get like Adidas or something for their school teams, like things like it's a totally different world, but that's unified in this kind of active protest against the same corporation in different periods. And so just, I guess throughout my work, I like to bring these this specific example doesn't come up in the work, but just this kind of tension, how these totally different worlds can interact, and when I bring them together, what kind of results from that tension. So I'm also going to kind of go into a little tangent about post-internet art. I don't know if you're familiar with this term. It's somewhat problematic for various reasons. But a lot of my practice, at least when I was a student, I was readily inspired by Marissa Olson and these ideas of post-internet. So I'm just going to read this quote. So she says in her essay that we are now in a post-internet era. Everything is always already post-internet. Just as there was once an epoch in which cultural producers and consumers were informed that they were in the postmodern, whether or not they were hip to it, we can now say that all works are post-internet, albeit to a lesser or greater degree of reflexivity, because all works produced now are produced in the post-internet era. So I'm just kind of saying everything is post-internet, meaning all work is informed by the internet in some way. Whether you're an architect who just spend an hour looking at memes, then you go to design something, do your work. Marissa Olson is claiming that we are all post-internet just because of this relationship of now we're always online and we're always being informed by it. Maybe it's a bit of a dated term in that way, but she was trying to like just make sense of the world at that time. I'm sorry I repeated this slide. So here's another just note about post-internet and just kind of why I'm really drawn to it. Duchamp took a urinal and signed it off as his own. Post-internet artists ironized authorship using hokey watermarks and computer voiceovers in video essays. The rebellious gesture of "I can do this too" by artists who hold little reverence for their predecessors. And why should they? Your canon was Dada, Warhol, and Duchamp, mine is Cantopop, Pokemon, and young boys performing cover songs. Why not make art that responds to online things that matter to me now? That's an essay by Jennifer Chan. Later in the essay, she really attacks post-internet and kind of says it doesn't accomplish the political goals of like a decolonized art movement like it should. But I think I use this quote just to kind of emphasize this kind of art making that just responds to the immediate things that matter to oneself instead of just what one is told is important. So I've kind of talked about in my practice, and basically all of those techniques of that thesis book are all visible kind of in this definition of post-internet. So I won't go over this again. But the tension, right, is I don't consider my post-internet art myself as a post-internet artist, but all my work could be viewed in that lens. So, for example, I don't know how familiar any of you are with post-internet, but if you do a Google search, this is kind of what might come up. A lot of grids and things that are kind of, the space is flattened, but physical at the same time. There's some nostalgic kind of technology, talking about like this obsolescence of our like ubiquitous tools like floppy disk, for example. But my work doesn't really look like any of this. Post-internet now, I guess, is also heavily critiqued because it just was co-opted by like, I guess the idea is it was co-opted by a gallery system that really flattened it into just an aesthetic, or just formal qualities, as opposed to whatever political importance it might have. So here are just some screenshots from Instagram of hashtag post-internet. There's these grids, these classical sculptures, there's video games, all kind of merging together. Ubiquitous tools like Photoshop and some more nostalgic kind of MS Paint in contrast with Photoshop, like flattening of spaces, virtual and real kind of joined together. So I was also really interested at the time in Vaporwave, and Vaporwave has actually shifted a bit in when you kind of look up the image search, because now it's very dominated by these bright neon colors, but it has a lot of similar formal qualities of like these grids and these classical busts, right? These grids that are just kind of being warped, some retro like nostalgia to it. I mean, these are also not. I won't get into that, but if you notice on the top left, there's a Fuji water bottle, and this is kind of an entry point to the first work or next work I'm going to talk about, which is about the kind of using Fiji water as a symbol coming from Vaporwave. So it's a piece that I kind of view as like part of like a Vaporwave series I have. But if you look up Fiji water and Vaporwave, you get all these sorts of images. This is from YouTube, this screenshot. So if you could click link 2, please, everyone, in your Google Doc. It's an advertisement from 4-ish years ago by Fiji Water. So if you could please watch that, I'm going to hit play and let it go in silence. Okay. Come back here for a second. So I'm kind of leaping from the internet into a more like starting to engage more with like physical current reality or something IRL or more immediate. So coming from my upbringing with like sometimes leftist or weird kind of anti-Nike family, seeing this ad brings up a lot of kind of that upbringing, I guess. Just like what is going on with this advertisement and this corporation. And so I guess Fiji Water in this ad, right, is suggesting there's a problem in our cities or our society, I guess, is that it's polluted and it's dirty, but to live, we really need a place that's not touched by humans. Like they're kind of creating this fantasy world where people don't live in Fiji. Where do they get the water from? Or this myth about Fiji. So I'm really interested in like the subtext here, or just how they can take that tension and try to sell, I guess rich Americans this water that's shipped all over the world as a solution to the problem, when it itself is also the problem. This kind of erasure of certain complicit behavior, I guess. So like on their website, this is a screenshot from yesterday on their website, just talking about how environmentally friendly they are, or their environmental goals or ethics, which obviously has very positive, I do want companies with these kinds of statements and actually making certain like progress or something around environmentalism. But just the irony of having a whole ad campaign about water that's untouched by man, while it is being touched in the extraction process. by definition, even though they claim there is a, like, right, people aren't touching the water, and it's put in the bottle in a very specific process that doesn't allow outside air to touch the water and things like that. So this comes to this next piece. This is like a thesis show. So this is a piece that kind of came from my MFA thesis. So it was taking a lot of text from that thesis book that you kind of have perused and exploded it to be around yourself. Like there's 12 screens, 4 speakers, sound and videos are jumping, appearing all around you. So instead of entering into like the feed of the thesis book, you enter into like the feed for this total immersive kind of feed around you. Kind of like goals Facebook has to create like Facebook with VR and stuff. So you're kind of choosing and showing them what you're most interested in from more than just one scroll. It's like you can be totally surrounded. Yeah. So if you could please click link 3 in the Google Doc and watch only until like 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I think I'll write that in the comment. Yeah, if you could please watch this, and then I'll continue in a moment. Okay. So I assume most of you have finished that section, so I'm just going to continue now. So I guess a lot of this thing about the media I've consumed and performing it. In this piece, I'm very much putting on display other people's performances of consumption. Um, so specifically, like highlighting these men and their performance of this myth of the Fiji Water Company. Um, right, kind of they take this information from the Fiji Water Company, how it's Earth's finest water, and there's nothing on Earth quite like it, and so these men kind of opening up this water for the first time and tasting it and reviewing it. I mean, there's a whole genre of people tasting and rating bottled water on YouTube. Um, but there's something I find really fascinating about specifically Fiji water because mythologizing it as this untouched um, land that hasn't been colonized and these men kind of opening up this kind of virginal water and putting on display um, this act in a kind of, in a way, self-aware way, right? They're aware they're performing for the camera, but there's these certain performances of that just like, I guess the subtext of what they're doing is what I'm trying to bring into the space. So I consumed all of this partly because I just got really interested in Fiji water, but I'm, it's also just naturally I'm just kind of viewing these things and thinking about them and journaling about them. Um, so yeah, a big part of my practice I would say is like demythologizing and like specifically fetishized objects. So using like the Fiji water, the symbol of the bottle itself as this fetishized object, kind of peeling back or opening it and seeing what's inside. So I'm going to quickly read this quote. This is a quote. So this is a very formative book, just like cutting off the Nikes, like formative experience for me in growing up. This book, No Logo, was always on my parents' shelf. And I read it maybe 10 years ago or so. But it's kind of, in the bottom left of the page, you can see that it's, Financial Times calls it a manifesto and call to arms that sometimes reads like an Orwellian nightmare. So this was also a big inspiration for that thesis book. So I'm going to read an essay by someone else who's kind of bringing Naomi Klein's No Logo together with Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Kind of talking about how both are acts of demythologizing. Whereas Naomi Klein is a investigative journalist and reporter, and Herman Melville was writing novels, kind of, just bringing these two different worlds and generation or totally different eras together. If you don't know much about whale oil as a source of fuel for lights and all sorts of lubricants and things, it was like a predecessor to fossil fuels that are currently extracted from underground. So on the next page, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'll just read this quote. It's kind of big, I guess. Concerned that contemporary products like a pair of Nike shoes comes to us branded and boxed fresh, primly pouched in tissue paper, and smelling faintly of freshly cut leather, Klein seeks to historicize the object by taking her readers back through the processes of marketing and manufacture and forcing an awareness of the branding practices and sweatshop labor that underpin Nike's corporate power. The strength of Klein's argument lies in her unwillingness to allow the fetishistic crispness of the tissue and the slick sophistication of the marketing to conceal the origins of the commodity. Just as Melville refuses to accept the casual assumption of light's purity and the smug complacency of the North's slave-free status, Klein identifies the ways in which Western consumers are complicit in the destructive manufacturing processes and neo-slavery of international corporations around the globe. I guess an aside is, right, I write this thesis as a student, not wanting to like canonize or be in conversation with canonized authors, but then, right, this talk itself, just the tension of now this talk, how I am kind of historicizing my practice and embedding it with certain kind of notable figures. I just forgot to say that earlier. I think that's kind of funny and interesting, and maybe someone will bring up as a question. I don't know. Right. So this kind of how this box can conceal, or the logo itself can just conceal its roots in our contemporary world. So in the video that you just watched, which was, I would guess, by the way, was a composite of all the screens, so you can kind of imagine how it would jump around you in space. Right at the end of, the idea is I'm bringing you to, or I think I'm bringing you to the factory itself, using the high quality footage of the Fiji Water Company, like B-reel from their in-house ad agency, and just bringing you to this site of this kind of bottle that I think kind of screams like individuality in a way, and this purity, but just seeing them going down kind of infinitely across the conveyor belt, kind of trying to confront that, I guess. But it's also important, I think, that they show you the factory in that video, which I found on like Vimeo or something. But they show that, like, the whole factory and how the bottles were made. It's all about the bottle itself, right? It's all about the brand. But there was actually, in that whole series, there's nothing about the actual extraction of the water, or the place it's from and the people who live there. It's just this kind of, in a way, similar to like a Nike shoebox, right? It's just a shoe. There's this fresh tissue paper in it. So I'm going to skip through this. I'm not going to read these, but the sperm whale oil is not clear. The idea is it burned clearer than any other kind of fat-based oil for lighting. Around 1850, whereas I like to just bring in to the same space this one liquid with this other one, and how they're both kind of claiming to be totally pure and innocent of their roots. And I guess just one note on Moby Dick is that the idea, or one idea that Ansley in that previous quote talked about, is the idea of bringing the reader to the site of slaughter, and just like globalization and colonization that came along with whaling. And so the idea is the reader would be reading at home, like in the dark, but they'd have their whale oil lit. So the idea is, I guess, this kind of way that Herman Melville was able to bring the reader to the place, I guess, to the factory, and then be complicit in what's happening, because the book itself is being lit. They're able to read this book because of like where this oil, this light is coming from. So just like kind of bringing these tension together, I kind of feel very in that same kind of realm, trying to bring the viewer into this factory and seeing the kind of fun aspects of Fiji Water too. Just like I don't know, it's these fancy bottles just feel so luxurious. But I'm gonna skip a little bit, but I guess the idea is I'm not explicitly totally in that piece. I am kind of at that last bit you saw, but I'm kind of metaphorically like inserting myself into these different characters I put in it, like the woman who's saying, actually, there is some stuff that's messed up about Fiji Water. I did some research, I'm this amateur researcher, and that really speaks to how I feel I am. Right? I'm not an expert. I'm on YouTube and I'm Googling things and just like amassing them and kind of presenting them in a new way, or just a new configuration if it's not an idea I came up with or something. Kind of like when Neo starts to learn about the Matrix, how false his reality was. So in the Matrix. So right, if you go to Instagram, hashtag Fiji Water, you see similar aspects of people kind of building up their own brand, their own identity through the associations of the Fiji Water Company. Sometimes it takes a life of its own. Sometimes it's very embedded in this kind of like purity myth of like life on the beach, or this on the bottom right, this kind of untouched nature scene, but also some Air Max shoes you know, how Nike, maybe how these brands can interweave really interesting senses of identity for the consumer, which we're all, I don't know, I feel I mean, it's easy for me to attack Fiji water, but, you know, have my own personal kind of connections and like brand loyalty with like Vans. This is a Vans shirt or something like that. So also, I was also trying to, in this piece, bring together like the high quality media of the Fiji Water Company mixed with some of it's a lot lower quality and compressed or out of focus of like these YouTubers, and just bringing the tension of just the different kind of production and the different kind of story building that can be created by just someone in their car, like a teenager, versus this big multinational corporation. I was really inspired at the time by Hito Sterl's essay in defense of the poor image, which is somewhat related here in that in her essay in defense of the poor image, she's really prizing like low quality images as like the significance they have and like the political importance they have. And it's from her book, The Wretched of the Screen, which is a reference to a book by Frantz Fanon. The Wretched of the Earth is a deep colonization text, formative text. So just kind of the implications of these kinds of just formal qualities and what they mean and how they can like come together or push against one another. So this comes to this next kind of informal project I'm going to talk about just a little bit. I guess I mentioned earlier taking screenshots of water bottles. So whenever I'm on my phone, I'm taking screenshots of all sorts of different things, mostly water bottles, just because for me they're kind of novel to me because I didn't have them growing up. I always had, you know, like, I guess it's funny, I have this massive water bottle that you maybe see me drinking from. Anyway, yeah, I'm the preachy water bottle artist. So here's Greta Thunberg with Evian water when she was crossing the Atlantic last fall, I guess a year ago now. Wow, that's summer, August. So just this kind of call out, in a similar way, this kind of call out culture, or just this kind of taking these things that are on the periphery, these water bottles that are on the periphery in people's lives or images, and making them the centerpiece just by, you know, collecting all of these screenshots together. So it's often celebrities, but, you know, I have friends. You know, I'm like a rogue little surveillance state amongst all my friends, and or just all the media that's shared with me. So, you know, artists holding water bottles, and people like on the right here, it's an ad I get all the time. I'm a musician, so I get like lots of music production, beats kind of advertisements, and so he shows up a lot with his Fiji water. Yeah, just the different ways they can be kind of hidden in these images, or they can be very obvious. I know it was like trending. I don't think I included it, but like Trump sipping water went viral, and like, I think it was 2016, recently after he entered the White House. But just the different places that these bottles can show up. I guess it's often Facebook, but sometimes like on the left, my friend sent me an image. So here's a Fiji water bottle, because I guess I'm the Fiji water artist now, or amongst the people I know. Yeah, so it's just a little tangent I wanted to go into. I guess we're getting pretty close to questions, a couple minutes, but so I guess the tension is I'm very I guess it makes me uncomfortable just to have these screenshots. I deliberately didn't show any screenshots of like friends I have and stuff like that because it does make me uncomfortable, this series. Also just feeling like when I'm on social media, like I'm consuming all this content, but I'm also, if I'm not even posting, I'm still producing content in a way. I'm like producing like the things I like and linger on, right? I'm producing a kind of identity of myself for like social media companies or for Google to like kind of collect data about me, right? So even when we're consuming, we're producing. This is this term and essay by Shoshana Zuboff. I'm not going to go to this link, but if you look up her name and surveillance capitalism, you can find some explanations on YouTube, and her PDF is probably available somewhere, pretty accessible. But just like talking about how in our virtual world, like, right, I'm sure this is now, I guess I feel like I'm talking to myself, so I'm not sure, I can't really gauge the room about this, but just how we are living in surveillance capitalism now, as opposed to like consumer capitalism or mercantilism or any kind of other form of economy. So, and we as users are what's being mined now, maybe more so than fossil fuels. So this also got me thinking about like unsecured IP cameras. I don't know if you know this, but if you have like all these Internet of Things cameras, if you don't change the password, it's very easy for people to get access to the camera and just like watch you in your home, or at the dog kennel, or like watching, you know, your dog when you're on vacation or something. Those are all maybe very accessible to people who can guess the password. So here's a post of Zuckerberg with a taped up microphone and video camera for, I mean, he's very high profile, but just his anxiety being kind of conveyed through this image of, also, I didn't make these arrows. I found this image, someone else calling him out or just pointing out in this image how I guess Zuckerberg is afraid of, you know, being hacked, and how insecure all of us can be to prying eyes when we're using the computer. So yeah, you can go online and just see lists of these webcams. You can go and consume this kind of content. And also you could accidentally just be producing content for the world and not know people are accessing your fridge's camera or something. That's in the wrong spot, my apologies. So I'm just gonna let this video play for a moment while I talk over it. There's no link for you all. There's no sound for it. But I guess there's a lot of me, I felt at this time very uncomfortable pointing out other people's, the things I find problematic in certain aspects of contemporary life, but I wasn't really calling attention to myself. So this is kind of a piece I view as like I'm calling out myself, and just my pleasures with things I don't maybe ethically completely agree with, and how I survive in that tension. Like I'm using this organic ketchup from Stop and Shop, putting it on, I guess I'm putting it on my hamburger from Burger King. I don't know why there wasn't ham ketchup on it already. It looks like that's expired ketchup. I showed the camera. But so I spent, it's like, I'll take one more minute. I set up 2 IP cameras in my house that you could just type in the IP address of my house with a certain port and just access my cameras at any time you wanted. So they were always on in my kitchen for a couple months. So I was kind of trying to take back ownership of myself and my data and my private life, in a weird, twisted way, where I was showing myself the things I do in my private life, as opposed to just going online and kind of feeling like I have no choice but to share my data and kind of be consumed by these like data barons. So in a twisted way, I decided, well, I'll just take ownership of it and be very extreme and just live with these cameras in my house. And so I would do certain like performances where I would dress up in like this cow costume from Amazon, and like this kind of, whenever I ate a hamburger, I would dress up kind of like I'm consuming myself as this kind of little metaphor. Yeah, consuming myself, but also for the camera. This was also live streamed to the RISD Museum so people could check in on my myself in the kitchen. And yeah, I guess one note is I flirt with veganism a lot. Like I'll be vegan for like a month or something, and then I go back and forth along this kind of spectrum. So it was like a way, kind of like taking screenshots from on my phone, just a way of allowing myself to be online. Oh, if I'm online and I'm like making artwork or something, it's okay. Or if I'm dressed up and I'm on camera, then I can enjoy myself and I can indulge in a hamburger, as long as I make it like an art practice or something. Yeah, so I guess that's the end of my talk. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. We can take some questions before not studio. Sorry, there's studio. Before any other classes start, if you raise your hand, so to speak, if you can do that, then I can unmute you so you can ask, or we can use the Q&A or chat, whatever you all prefer. So, if there are any questions?
You can also email me at any time and send me a question too. If something comes up later or self-conscious now, I would love to you to do that. So.
Yeah, it's this is a great talk, also because it's a type of content that in architecture we don't really necessarily deal with all the time, which is this sort of very nimble and nuanced reflection on contemporary culture. Also because architecture tends to be very slow as a discipline in the number of years it takes to do anything, whereas this is much faster, and I think it might chart interesting courses for architecture as architecture moves more into the realm of the image, and as more buildings are experienced just as renderings or specific shots that are on every blog rather than experienced in person. It's helpful to start seeing architecture also in this
way.
Cool. Well, I guess since there aren't any questions now, I'll hope that our viewers can reach out to you on their own in their leisure.
Cool.
But I'd like to thank you again for doing this, and it's great to see this work, and thank you again, Paul, for suggesting.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.